Do you have 6x6 paper pads in your collection that you would love to just use up? Hi, I'm Jess from JessCrafts.com, and I'm here to help you make the most of your crafty supplies and time. So let's get making. Today I have Holiday Elegance from Recollections. It's a Christmas paper pad. It has 24 sheets of paper, and in today's video I am going to use every single piece of the paper, and there will be no patterned paper scraps. So this paper pad, I kind of went through it and I started writing down which sketches I thought might work for it, but I'm going to walk you through the whole process and how I would use it, and I'm going to try to use some of the more challenging pieces of patterned paper. So, rather, like, this is double-sided paper. So there's challenging pieces like this, or like maybe I'm not quite sure how to make a card with it, you're thinking. Instead of just going to the back and using the back, I am going to try to show you some ideas for using patterned paper like that. So let's get started. I also do have the Recollections die cut stickers that kind of seem to go with it. They don't have the same name on them, but they did seem to remind me of each other, and I thought that would be quick embellishments to go with these cards, so I will be pulling those in as well. I do believe this paper is from 2023. Yeah, I think it says that date on there. So it's not necessarily currently available at Michael's. The way that we're going to use every single paper and leave no patterned paper scraps is by using my 6x6 paper busting templates. So it shows you how to take a 6x6 piece of paper, and generally you make A2 size cards, but because one of the patterns is a little challenging, I'm actually going to make 5x7 cards with that piece of paper, but generally we'll make A2 cards today. I do have Recollections Kraft cardstock cut into card bases because an 8.5 by 11 piece of cardstock will make 2 card bases. I do have a video about that if you've never done that before. This video should be relatively beginner friendly, so if you haven't made cards before, you should be able to follow along and make cards. And so I have a whole bunch of 6x6 paper busting templates. I in fact have 50 6x6 for A2, but I also have like 6x8 pattern paper and 12x12 pattern paper. So if you have a different size of pattern paper you're trying to use up, you will probably find those templates and those card sizes at jesscrafts.com. Okay, so paper pad. I wanted to start with certain papers that I knew, okay, this is going to be tricky to use. I got to come up with a plan for it. And something I like to do is I will often put them in these like project folders so I can keep track of what my plan is. The first one is I wanted to come up with a new template for this Merry and Bright paper. This is the one that's going to be a 5x7 card because I think, it says, may our spirits be merry and bright this time of year. To me, that actually looks like a card sentiment. Sometimes the sentiments on here don't really work as well for cards, but because it does work well for cards, I really want to take advantage of it. And I want to make sure that I am actually using that piece of paper. So I created 6x6 paper busting template for 5x7 cards number 11, which will make one 5x7 card with one sheet of 6x6 paper. So I'm going to put that to the side. All of these paper busting templates will be linked in the video description, so you can go down there and download each of these templates, or you can look for some other ones that maybe work better with the particular paper pad that you have. So I'm going to take both sheets of these out of the pad, and I'm also going to add those 5x7 cards all into this folder. The next patterned paper that this collection had that I wanted to make use of were these 2x2 inch squares. So most of them are really good for card sentiments. I would be comfortable using all of these as a focal point on my card. A few of them don't have sentiments. These ones I could easily stamp a sentiment into them, and we'll come up with a plan for this particular one here. We can maybe squeeze in a tiny sentiment or something like that. But there are 9 of these squares on each paper, and I could use the back. So like I could cut out Noel and then take these other 2 and use the back to make this sketch. This is sketch number 30. But I don't really want to do that because there are so many good card sentiments here. I want to use all of these focal points instead of just using the back side of the cards, which means I need to pair it with other patterned paper. So rather than cutting every single square from one sheet, I'm going to cut the same squares from several sheets of paper and then combine them back together. I did the math. I have 18 squares of sentiments, and therefore I'm going to need 2 pieces of other patterned paper to go with each of these. So if I have 18 of these focal point squares, I'm going to need 36, or double the number of patterned paper squares. So if I have 2 sheets of this, I need to double it and have 4 sheets of other patterned paper. I have picked this relatively neutral tone-on-tone red. It's kind of the same on both sides, are like burgundy colored, because some of these are very green based. And then for the other one, because some of them are very burgundy based, I picked a green patterned paper so that I compare the burgundy ones with green and the green ones with burgundy, so they kind of stand out. So that's my logic there. The other side is, you know, a little bit lighter of a green and does have some red dots in it, but I still think it will pair well with the red ones, or I can just use this side if I like. So then again, I'm going to take these and I'm going to put them all in one of these folders. Now, here's the thing though, because there are 18 of those little squares on the 2 pieces of paper, that means I'm making 18 cards of this exact sketch, which is not for everyone. So I just want to point that out. You might prefer to just use the back side of some of those squares. And so I'll count 18 craft cards. This is not actually 18 of them, but that is how I'll keep it organized. All right, next up, I had an idea to use this one with Paper Busting Template 15. So Paper Busting Template 15 asks you to use like a really long, big strip of patterned paper in the back and then a thin strip across it. So it uses a really nice large chunk of a particular patterned paper. So it's really great when you have a pattern paper you really want to show off a lot of, but also because it uses this strip along the bottom, it can work out well for these kind of pattern papers that have the strips. So what I'm going to do is not taking too much advantage of this patterned paper, in fairness, although you could do it either way. I can either use this for this long piece, or I can use this side for the long piece, and I'm gonna cut it from the bottom because I notice that if I measure this, 1/2 inch will cut off the deer here. You could also, there's about 1/2 inch on this first sentiment on the top, but if when I cut that to the 3-inch mark, it is going to cut this sentiment in half, which is not really what I think I want to do. Also, this circle at the top kind of comes into that 1/2 inch strip there. So we're gonna use it as the deer, and I think I'll show you both like alternatives for this, like with the stripe paper being most of the card, and then with the green paper being most of the cards, because we are gonna get to make 4 cards with these 2 pieces of patterned paper. Now, I said that this looks like a great sketch for when you have a pattern paper that you think is really pretty and you want to show off a lot of. And so I'm going to come back to that reindeer paper, this red reindeer paper. I thought it was really pretty, and I don't want to cut it into teeny tiny bits. So I'm going to put this red reindeer paper in the background and use just a little strip of this backside for the cards. And so now I'll have 4 cards for this sketch, or sorry, 2 for each. So 2, 4, 6, 8 cards from this sketch. So I can even make a note of that for myself. And again, I'm gonna slip it, I'm gonna get some of those card bases, and I'm gonna put it in an envelope to keep it organized. Okay, this one is for a couple of the patterns that have these trees along the bottom. There was this paper with the green trees, and this is very common to have like something along the bottom of a card or of a pattern paper in these collections in my experience. I've worked with these a few times. There'll be other videos on my channel where I've worked with Recollections paper pads or Michael's paper pads. And this one here similarly has these trees along the bottom. They're a little bit different because they have the deer, but they're gonna work well for this. So essentially, what I have in this sketch is that there are 2 3x3 squares. I show it as, you know, making 1 card from the top of the pattern paper and 1 card from the bottom. But basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn it on its side, and I'm gonna cut my 2 3x3 squares from the bottom of these pattern papers, which will leave me some clear room for like a sentiment, for instance. And then I'll take the top and I'll either use the green side on this one or the back, and then they'll be cut diagonal and split across the card. This one, Similarly, if I cut it to 3 inches like that, you're gonna get one deer on one piece, and a nice focal point, and then the other deer on the other piece. The only difference is I need to take advantage of the fact that this is double-sided, because this top square is going to be cut on the diagonal, and then the Merry Christmas is gonna be all cut up and all that, so I will have to use the back of this one to make it work. But again, each of these papers is going to make 2 cards. So we're going to get 8 cards from sketch number 49. Now, what's left in the paper pad is, to me, just like very simple pattern papers. A lot of these have relatively small scale. They're like, you know, they're like sized down, rather than sometimes if you get like a 6x6 pattern paper and the scale of the patterns is really large. That's not what I'm noticing here, or not very much anyway. So I feel like I can pretty much do whatever I want with these, but I'm gonna have to, you know, go to my 6x6 sketches. And I'm gonna wanna pick things that don't make too many cards, because I already made a lot of cards with this. That was one of the sketches, you know, makes 3 cards each. We're making 18 of the same card. So now I wanna go in my collection and pick things that just make 2 cards. So I have a whole binder, because I've printed off all of my sketches. These are all ones that I have created where I've decided how to cut, and there's more in a whole other binder too, but how to cut patterned paper exactly to make cards. Different sizes of cards, different sizes of pattern paper, but today we're looking at the 6x6 A2. So I wanted something that's really simple, but probably one I haven't used a lot, so maybe I'll go a little bit later in my collection. I'm always like, when I'm making like a ton of cards at once, like I'm doing here, I'm tempted to shy, like I don't want to use this one where I have to like die cut 3 circles or something like that. But then this one here, you need non-directional patterned paper for. It's a simple sketch, but kind of interesting. And I do have, like, I've made myself little paper templates to help me cut them, but it needs non-directional patterned paper. And this floral paper, and then on the back are trees, so they're kind of directional. Pine cones are non-directional, and so is this. So maybe this will be a fun one. It only works for this particular sheet that I have left, because all the others have, well, this one probably isn't directional. I think I can get away with that being upside down. Maybe not though. Well, I'm trying to look like, you know, do the leaves have, I think it'll be okay. So maybe we'll do these 2 with sketch number 19. And I'll talk about this when I get to how to cut those. And again, each paper makes 2 cards, so there'll be 8 cards of this. Now, these are directional, so I do want to take that into account when I pick some new sketches for it, but I have 4 pieces left. I'm going to pick one sketch that I think will work well for both of them, just so that I don't have too many sketches going on. This is another one that's kind of similar to 19, where directionality matters, but it has some interesting lines instead of just cut squares. I try not to only do like squares and rectangles, because that's the easy thing to do. This one is always great for fast cards and for when you want to show off a lot of the patterned paper. Kind of like 15, I think, that we're using. These ones are great for like super easy cards. It's just 2 big old chunks of patterned paper, but I want to do something a little more interesting today. Or just kind of, this gives you a good idea of all the kinds of different things that I have. This one I think is always kind of fun, because it has like some, like they hang off the card, or they look like they're hanging off the card a little bit, so it adds like a sense of movement to them. But since I'm not doing card mats, probably not going to, maybe that one is a good fit. It's got a few more pieces, so it takes a little bit more time to cut all those pieces, but since we're skipping card mats, that's gonna save us some time. So we'll use sketch number 40, and it will make, again, 8 cards. I'm going to walk you through how I would cut each of the patterned papers, but I'm gonna cut like probably just 1 patterned paper for each sketch, so you see how it works. I am not going to cut the patterned paper mats, but if you want to know what size mats I recommend or I'm showing, those are right there on the sketch. So you can always find those out if you really like adding that layer to your card, but I haven't done the math yet. I'm gonna make a lot of cards today, probably like over 40 cards. So since I'm gonna do it all relatively quickly, I don't have months and months. But if you don't want to take your time with your Christmas cards, by all means, go ahead and cut those mats for them as well. Okay, so this is 6x6 paper busting template for 5x7 cards number 11. It says to cut a 6x3 off the top. Now, I want the 6x3 to be out of the center, so I'm gonna have to modify this sketch a little bit. And in fact, I might even, when you download the sketch, it might look right. I might put the rectangle in the center for you to make it a little bit easier. But the first thing I'm gonna do is cut off the branding strips to make these 2 6x6 pieces of paper. I was finding that you are gonna cut off just a tiny bit of the pattern when you cut it down to the 6x6 size. I am not considering these pattern paper scraps. I am considering this garbage, just so you know. Okay, we wanna cut 1.5 inches off the top. It's gonna be close. Ooh, maybe too close. Oh no, did my math not work out? Okay. I'm gonna really regret this because I'm cutting 2 pieces at once. Okay. 1.5 inches off the bottom. And if I do, I think I needed to have saved that little bit of extra because this is gonna cut off my words. Might be a do as I say, not as I do kind of situation, and I might just make it a little bit bigger than 3 inches. Okay, so I did cut into this pattern a little bit because if I had cut to that mark, I would have cut off the Our Spirits Bright. So, sorry, I'm kind of seeing this a little bit in real time, but I think it's also nice to sometimes see how this stuff works out. So I did cut this to 3.125 inches. It's going to be totally fine. You would have to adjust your mat if you're going to cut a mat. And then these are going to be slightly smaller. This one is going to be slightly smaller than 1.5 inches. So again, you would have to adjust your mat. But in this instance, maybe, you know, since we're working with a very specific pattern paper, it would just be easier to not put a mat on them. So I'm going to cut these to 3 inches. And we are going to use the back sides when we assemble the card. Okay, again to 3 inches, then we can assemble our cards. Okay, so we take the 4 smaller strips and we're just gonna put them equidistant from the top and bottom all around the card, just like it shows here on the card sketch. And because it's a little bit like suddenly kind of cut off, you might prefer a mat around this to kind of make it stand out a bit more. That's totally up to you. But like, you know, you could skip the mat on the outer pieces because they really pop off the white just fine. But maybe to kind of separate the 2 reds, you could come in with like a Kraft cardstock mat. In terms of the fact that I did start slicing the paper, realized it was incorrect, I'm not gonna actually do anything to fix that per se. I'm just gonna tape it down and I'm gonna make sure there's some adhesive on that cut seam, and then it'll be stuck down to the paper. Oh, there's a little bit of adhesive hanging out over on that side. And honestly, most people are never gonna notice that there's technically a small slice. Like I can hold it up to the camera, you know it's there, you can probably see it. But for the most part, it's gonna be relatively not noticeable, and hopefully you've seen my mistake and you won't do it if you wanted to recreate this card because you have this paper pack. Next one's kind of intense because we're gonna make so many cards. We're gonna make 18 cards. We're gonna cut 6 pieces of pattern paper this way. But basically, you are just cutting to 2-inch squares from the like more plain papers, and then a note. So I'm gonna cut down to that 6-inch mark. Then I'm gonna cut a 2-inch strip off. I am cutting 2 papers at once. My paper trimmer can handle that. Use your discretion about what you know with your paper trimmer, but it can save some time if you feel comfortable. And then again, cutting at 2 inches off and another 2 inches off until I've turned it all into a bunch of 2-inch squares. Now, with this patterned paper, I'm gonna focus a lot more on cutting on the line. So maybe, you know, if I were to measure, if I like, you know, carefully line up the edge of my paper trimmer, it does look like it's right on the 4-inch mark, but sometimes it's not. So I just want to make sure that you're prioritizing cutting on the line versus measuring exactly to 2 inches. Because every once in a while, there'll be a slight difference between those two things. And so again, just trying to cut on the lines between them. I will only cut 1 sheet of paper at a time so that I can make sure I'm really close to the lines. If I ever get like, so on this one, there's a little bit of the next pattern over on this block. So when I go to cut this one, I am gonna cut that off, and I'm not gonna consider that a scrap because that's just an unwanted piece. But just to be clear, I do understand that's probably gonna happen sometimes. That to me is just garbage. So I will keep going, cut a whole bunch of 2x2 blocks and assemble that card. Sketch number 30, when we assemble, it's gonna be one of those ones where some people are going to want to do a little bit more because it's kind of plain, especially without the mats. It takes up a little bit less room on the paper. So what you could do if you want to add a little something to the background. Now I did pick Kraft cardstock rather than white cardstock just because I think that alone helps quite a bit. You could add the mats. You could use a colored card base. You could spritz the background, add a little ink to the background. You could dry emboss the card front. All of these things would add a little extra interest to these cards. I do have a video specifically addressing my ideas for if you have if you want to use up some of that white space in the background of some of my card sketches. So I'll try to remember to link that in the video description. But as you can see, this is the one that's making like a ton of cards. And so some of them already have their sentiment and they're done completely. Others I want to pull in a sentiment or embellishment, but I usually save that for the end. I kind of pull aside any cards that I think are gonna need a little bit more and address those then. Next up, we have 6x6 paper busting template number 15. This one is very, very simple. You're going to cut it down to its 6 inches. Then you're going to cut a 1/2 inch strip off of the bottom. You can adjust that if like the strip that you want on your particular patterned paper, if you're using a different collection, is at the top, or if you just prefer the top of this paper. So I'm gonna cut 1/2 inch off, and that is going to leave us with these cute little deer. You might prefer to go a little bit wider with your patterned paper, but then know that it is not going to extend the entire length of the card. So currently, my 3-inch piece will meet the entire length of the card. I'll use the back side in this instance. And then my deer at a 3-inch piece will go across here. But if you wanted to like include the entire bit of the deer, just know that you're gonna shorten this. And if you're okay with that, that's totally fine. And then I wanna show you the other. So if I'm just using a pattern paper like this, I'm trying to show off this deer side. You can approach it the other way of cutting cutting it in half at the 3 inches and then cutting your 1/2 inch off to follow the sketch. And then here, I'll be turning this over and using this darker piece and stretching it across the deer paper. Great way to use a pattern paper that you really, really love. Let's talk about assembling sketch number 15. So as it is shown here, we can take that little 1/2 inch strip, flip it over and put it on the other side. And this is like the very traditional way. But when we're dealing with that more tricky paper, the one with the stripes on it, we talked about 2 different options. We could do it exactly like the sketch says, and then that leaves us with just a little bit of that deer paper or deer strip or whatever your paper has. Or you can choose to make some adjustments to the called for sketch. So I decided that I like the idea of having all of the deer showing, like cutting off that whole strip, and therefore it makes my card a little bit different because instead of touching the top and bottom, it now leaves a little bit of a gap. I could put a card mat that would then eliminate the gap. I could put a card mat around both this back piece and the deer piece, or I can just leave it as is, and I still think that it looks fine, but I just wanted to make sure that I showed you the sketch as intended and what I might do to make it better work for the particular patterned paper that I have. I am also using, I have a grid mat that has an A2 card base in the center. It has an outline of an A2 card base, both vertical and horizontal. So I'm putting it in the vertical card base area, and this is allowing me to make sure that I'm lined up a little better left to right, because I'm leaving a 1-inch gap on each side, like 1 square. Is that, no, that's a 1/2 inch, sorry. A little over 1 square on each side. So it just letting myself line things up with the mats. You don't need one that has this. You could even draw that. You could get a piece of graph paper and make your own sort of similar thing. But those lines can be helpful if you find it a little bit tricky to line things up. We're working on template number 49. We're working with another one of our, more challenging papers. I don't need our sticky notes anymore. And these are the ones that have like some embellishment on the bottom, kind of a large embellishment too. Like I wouldn't want to be cutting like an inch strip or something here or on these Christmas trees. So I'm using sketch 49, but remember we're kind of turning it on its side. So this is more like the bottom. We are going to be cutting 2 3x3-inch pieces off the bottom. So the first thing that I'm going to do, or the first thing you do on all of them, is to cut that branding strip off, but I'm going to skip that step for this moment and just, I'm going to cut the bottom off. So it is 3 by 6 inches, and then I'm going to cut that in half. And now I have sort of my main focal point. That's this here in the center. And then I'm going to take this top piece, cut it again at 3 by 6 inches. And I'm going to cut each of these, and I'm going to use the flip side. On this one, it's necessary because otherwise I would be, using pieces of this, which wouldn't really make any sense. But on this one, of course, you can make a different choice. But I'm going to be cutting it on its 2 diagonals. So I'm lining up the points with the edge of my paper trimmer. Sometimes there's paper trimmers that have like wire guides and stuff that can make that a little bit easier. And you could also cut it with scissors. If for some reason that felt more comfortable, you could draw a line with the pencil first and cut along it. Different things like that if you have a little bit of trouble lining that up. And of course, always follow all manufacturer's instructions with tools like paper trimmer, which can be, it's important to use it correctly and safely. So, and then we will have our bird paper from the other side. I am a little concerned that this bird paper is directional, and this sketch prefers, oh no, it all worked out. Okay, I was like, I think it does work with directional pattern paper. I think it's fine. If you do have directional pattern paper, you might need to just take a moment and notice which triangle to put in which area, so that the in this case, there's like little birds on here, and so that it looks like the birds are, like facing in a way that makes sense. But you just want to take a moment and make sure you're matching up the pieces that you need to. To assemble sketch 49, we're going to take the 2 pieces and spread them across the page. Now, depending on if you have directional paper or not, you might find that you have to switch which corner these triangles go into. So sometimes when I cut this bird paper, because it has directionality, I was able to put them in the left and right corners as prescribed in the sketch. But then this time, the way that I cut them, because I wasn't paying terribly much attention, means that I'm going to have to put them in the bottom left and then the top right. It doesn't really change the sketch that much, but it is something that I wanted to point out because it is a unique challenge of having directional patterned paper involved. And so the other side of this deer paper was directional. And so then I can assemble it completely. And I want to show you we created 8 cards with this sketch. Looking quite different. Next up, we have a 6x6 paper busting template number 19. This one's kind of unique because it has this like slightly different shape to it. We're kind of creating like a banner and pennant shape, I think are the words for it. Anyway, it does say that, so these are 3 inches wide, and then I give you the measurement to the bottom points, and then the measurement to the top point so that you can figure out where you should be making these. I do have a video where I like really break down this sketch when I first introduced the sketch, but I created templates for myself as well so that like this is, you know, 4.5 inches to the bottom point, and this is 2.5. So basically what I did was I took a piece of white cardstock here. And I'm going to show you a little bit with the patterned paper how you could do it. So we have this 3x6 inch piece, and I made a mark at 4.5 on each side, and then I made a mark at 2.5 in the center, and I drew lines from the 4.5s to the 2.5 measurement. So 2.5 this way, but 4.5 that way on each side. Draw the lines in with a ruler, and then you could cut along those lines. And you could do that for each of your pieces of patterned paper. You know, so you could cut them down to 3x6 inches and you can measure that, or you can create this template and then you can take a scissor. Some paper trimmers also work fine for this because you can like, you know, slide it to just a particular point. But then I can just cut along this measurement here that I've made on both sides. And I don't worry about it being like really super precise, you know, but I wanted to give you like a methodology for following. So then you can put mats on these, and there's some, you know, comments about that. Usually I don't have like so much teeny tiny little print, but it's because I'm describing the specialness of this sketch. And then so ultimately the card will look like that. So I'm going to take each of the 4 pieces of paper that I picked out for this. I'm going to cut them to their 3x6. I'm going to take my template that I explained how to create, and I'm just going to trim along it and just cut out this one piece, which will, and then the piece that's left over will match that other template. If you find it easier to cut into the template, like if you would rather hold this on, then go for it. You know, like that, I wanted to make sure you have, like, explain how to create both pieces so that you can do whichever one feels comfortable to you in the moment or for a particular piece of patterned paper. Sketch 19, putting it together, very simple. We're putting the larger piece down first. You can experiment with like which side of the paper you like if you have double-sided paper like I do. I kind of wanted the lighter piece to, in this case, for the focal point, because I thought then if I wanted to put an embellishment or a sentiment or something, it'd be a little bit easier to read. I had a hard time picking which one I wanted for here, but I think ultimately I went with the red one because I thought that when I put one of these die cut embellishments on it, which I will do all my embellishing at the end, I thought I might be able to find something that stands out more. And the pine cones might be like a little bit distracting around a focal point or to stamp on or something. So it was kind of hard. This one I could have gone either way. But this one I really liked having a larger piece of that really pretty green paper and then a clear place to put some embellishment. And those are my 8 cards. So for our final sketch and 8 cards, this one does not work with directional patterned paper because we're going to take this piece and turn it on its side. However, if you're working with double-sided paper, as long as one side is non-directional, we can make it work. So I don't remember if I was taking that because this definitely has one side that is directional. And this paper does too. So I'm not sure what I was thinking there. But luckily for me, the other side of each one is non-directional. So we are gonna make it work. Got lucky there for sure. Okay, so to do this one, we're going to cut it in half to 3x6 inches. Then you're going to cut a 2 1/4 inch piece off, and that's going to be kind of the focal point piece. So at 6, if I bring it to 4 and then take 1 more quarter off, we'll go to 3 1/4, because these bits are going to be 1 inch by 3 1/4 inches. So then I'm going to cut these into 1 inch strips. I am cutting 2 pieces of paper right now, so I'm being careful to hold them together. And, oh, I may have misspoke. I'm gonna, I think I needed to turn this whole sketch on its side to make it work, and I knew this from the last time I used the sketch, that right now, I'm going to explain it to you so that you can fix it if you have non-directional pattern, or if you have directional pattern paper. So currently, if there's directionality, this is the top. So here's the deer. I can't turn the deer on their side, which is what this calls for you to do. And then I cut the deer like this, and then it calls for you to turn them on their side. It doesn't work. However, if you were to change the whole sketch so it's this way, then the directionality will cut, you know, if you cut it in half, top to bottom, the directionality will work. And so I'm going to do it correctly with the second piece of paper, which does have directionality. And hopefully I can fix or provide an alternate for that sketch, because I mean that sketch has existed for a while now. Okay, so this is directional pattern paper. So instead of cutting it this way, I'm going to cut it this way. And I'm going to, so my Christmas trees, you can see them. They're tiny little Christmas trees there. We're going to cut the top off to 3x6. And then we're going to cut a 2 1/4 inch piece. I'm sorry, I'm full of mistakes today in this video, but hopefully some of you find it educational in some way to watch some of those mistakes and see how I adapt to them, because I think, you know, I'm sure it happens to other people when they're crafting, where you thought you had a plan and everything was gonna work out and then it just doesn't. And I don't wanna throw out any of this, so I'm gonna make it work, but I'm sure, you know, hopefully it's helpful to have some ideas for what to do and to not panic. Like, no, we can still do something with this sketch. So I'll cut these, and now my directionality works out. I never do write on them about that, like about the specific issue of directionality, but it does come up in pattern paper, so it's something worth talking about when it does. Okay, so all of this paper is directionally correct, but this isn't. So I think what we're gonna do is have to mix and match the patterned papers in order to make this work, because I can only use the green side of these. Or what I could do, and so there's basically, if you look at the sketch, a strip at the top, a strip, two strips at the top, one coming from each side of the patterned paper. And then a final strip at the bottom with a bit of a gap in between, and then you're supposed to put this piece here. You could face it this other direction. And as you can see, there's a little bit on each side, and so it's an easy way to adapt the sketch for this, you know, one side is directional and one side is not patterned paper, as we could simply to do this change up of it. I always say that, like, this is the really important part, like cutting it this way because there's no scraps, but then you can go ahead and rearrange all of the pieces however you want. So I can totally turn this into a horizontal card. It's definitely going to look different in the end. And you know, or like I could put all of the strips to one side on a horizontal card. You know, you can take those pieces and rearrange them however you want, but as long as you cut it according to the sketch, you're going to wind up with a no scrap. So I can either turn this paper on its side, or if I'm being honest, I don't really love this reindeer paper. It's not my favorite. So I could instead take a piece from the other patterned paper and put it with the green paper. And then the second card can be these brown strips with the green patterned paper. And so that's probably what I'm going to do. And hopefully we've worked through the mistakes or the misconsiderations for this sketch. After all that discussion worrying about directionality, I actually don't really like either side, or for this project, of the directional patterned paper. So I am mostly using the green, and then there's like the red floral side anyway. So this sketch shows you, as I mentioned, the two on the top and the one on the bottom, and then I will put this one here in the center, and we'll be following the sketch because it didn't matter with the non-directional patterned paper the way I cut it. I did make one with the brown strips in the background that were directional, but it just feels kind of empty to me. Like there's not, I don't know, I think that, because the alternative is to use this red paper, I think that stands out a bit more, but I could see that maybe somebody says this is busier, or, you know, so if you're using the same paper I've had, you can take that into consideration. Maybe this isn't the sketch for this, or maybe adding mattes will give it a, like, could tone it down a little bit or something like that. So now that I've made all the cards in the sense that I've cut and glued all of the patterned paper, and now I am ready for embellishing the cards. I picked out the designs that I think are most in need of embellishing. Some of the designs, such as like all these squares here, most of them have a focal point on them and a sentiment. Some of them I do need to stamp a sentiment with. And then also these ones here with the squares and triangles, I think a sentiment is mostly what these need. You know, maybe like a bigger sentiment or a bold sentiment, but I don't know that they need like a big sticker. So I have 24 die cut stickers that kind of coordinate with this collection, and I'm going to decide how I want to start using them. Since there are only 24 pieces, I wouldn't be able to put one on every card anyway, so I'm going to have to make some prioritization decisions. And there are 2 of each. So if I pick one and I like it for something, I can put it on 2 of the cards, but most of these there's 4. So I'm gonna have to pick 2 embellishments for each. I could see like going kind of matchy-matchy. There's like this, the deer paper, I could put the deer embellishment on it, although I feel like that those are 2 very busy things together. I'm not really immediately liking those. I kind of didn't want to cover up too much of the paper, so something really large like that. I'm a little worried these stickers are going to be all the wrong size for what I want, but this Noel looks like it might work here. It's going to cover up a good amount of that paper. It's kind of going to detract a little bit from the design, but it will work. And to some extent, for me, like when I'm like, you know what, I think this works, I kind of just go with it and try not to like overthink or over-optimize things. So this one here, I'm a little concerned that it doesn't stand out very much. I think it'll stand out a little bit more on this design, so I think we'll put the 2 birds there. And I'll like kind of take, okay, I have these 2 embellishments, these 2 cards, and I'll put them together off to the side. I'm not gonna make you like watch me peel and stick stickers. We kind of know we all know how that works. I think this sentiment is a good way to finish off this card, because I don't, like I said, I don't want to cover up too much of that. It is a little busy, but it being green when everything else on the card is red, there's some red in it, of course, which ties it in, but it being green allows it to stand out enough to me. So I like that. I still am going to need more designs or more stickers for this. So I'm going to look at the second half of the pack. That's Santa. I'm still thinking about him. So there's this Joy. I think it works. It's similar to the Noel, but the red, I don't like it quite as much. I feel like it doesn't stand out. And then I was like, maybe this one, but it just says Christmas Forest, and that doesn't make sense as a sentiment for me. I don't see myself using this sticker, unfortunately. So I think we'll just go with the Joy. It does have the deer in it, so. Now, these cards, I'm thinking, I do have these smaller ones again. So maybe this, I mean, it's pine cones with the pine cones. So let's go with it. I need another one for these cards and these, and I think like these are particularly difficult on this one. So that's definitely not gonna work, these really tall ones. I think I'm gonna have to use one of these circles. There's this one here, or the Joy. I think that the reindeer stands out a little bit more with that green circle. So we'll put those to the side. And then this is when things are gonna start getting a little trickier, because I'm like, oof, now I got some really big embellishments left. I like that deer though. I think he totally works on those ones. So nice. This one here, I mean, that covers that up so much. I don't think that really makes sense. This could maybe work. I wonder if it would be better on the green design, because I think we need more for that. I think that that probably works a little bit better, even though it's green with the green tree, but it is touching a lot of the red as well. So we'll go there. Although I think that means it'll also be with this one, and that still looks fine as well. Okay, we're not leaving ourselves many choices. Santa works. I think I'd probably maybe want a sentiment with him still. Sometimes I do wait until I've actually like have a purpose for the card to add a sentiment. Although in this case, it is clearly a Christmas card. I mean, Santa. But that is something to keep in mind. Don't always feel the pressure to put on it. But although I will sometimes make Christmas cards and then stamp thank you on them and send them off as thank yous for Christmas gifts as a way of using more Christmas paper. So something to consider. And these, this particular set, being green and red like this, if I didn't use a specifically Christmas embellishment, I think I could make this card lean more towards just like a general winter card. So something to consider, you know, one could do that. But I do want to use up the embellishments that I purchased to go along with this patterned paper pack. And so I'll have to see what, I think I have, it's the red ones I need to finish embellishing. I think we picked out everything for the green. It does cover it up a lot, but if these are my only two choices left, I think I'm gonna have to pick, oh, I guess I kind of like that though. It's a lot of green, so I could kind of reconsider switching up one of those other ones and like, does it look better here or here? I think I maybe slightly prefer it on this one, but then I maybe have to switch this one to the, you know what I mean? Like I might have to play around with it a little bit. But either way, it does cover up a good chunk of that design. That's kind of going to be something that I've decided to let happen because I have picked such large embellishments to go with it. But I hope like kind of just like, I'll show you all the cards at the end after I put the stickers on, but talking through how I make those decisions is hopefully helpful. I'll also show you like some of the sentiments that I pick out for stamping and, you know, maybe why I chose those. So we have now used the entire patterned paper pad. There is no scraps, nothing left. I do have these two stickers because I chose not to use them. I just didn't like the sentiment. But other than that, everything is gone completely. And I think, you know, when you consider like the price, especially if you purchase this on sale, you're getting a lot of cards with a relatively inexpensive amount of materials. These are the only two cards that I kind of wish I had, like, I wish these stickers worked because they really could use something else at the top. For the other two, I did put that joy wreath at the top, but I might do like a simple die cut word or something like that to eventually finish those off. I'm not too worried about it for now. In terms of finishing off those ones that I thought required some stamping in the corner, I did pick a sentiment from a scrapbook.com stamp set, which would not be available at Michael's. I didn't want to purchase a stamp set from Michael's that, like, you know, maybe was available in their Christmas collection because I already have so many Christmas sentiments. It really wasn't something I needed. And you don't, your stamp sets don't go bad. So I did stamp in colored ink to add a little bit of interest to a few of these. And then these ones, because they were kind of dark, I stamped it in black ink. But we have those cards where we got to show off a lot of that really pretty patterned paper, but we paired it with the words. I was able to kind of sort out which of those last few die cuts should go on which of these cards. I know I had a little bit of indecision around that, but I think those deers are so cute. I like that they put a sentiment on them. I think that was kind of an unexpected thing to do, but it really worked out well for them. I'm glad that they gave you, like, as much as these were definitely, all these embellishments were kind of on the larger side, I do appreciate that there was somewhat of a mix of large and small. I liked the good amount of round kind of embellishments because those I find to be pretty easy to work with. Here again, I added some stamps to those very simple cards that didn't have anything. So like, even though most of these cards from this set had focal points and sentiments right on there, there was a few that could needed that stamp added in there. So I picked a different sentiment, the joy from the same stamp set that I was using. I again stamped it in colored ink just for it to be a little bit more interesting. You can absolutely always just like, I mean, if you have black and brown, you'll pretty much match any card you need, but I like having a few, or I like having a set of colors so that I can branch out, because it doesn't take any more time to stamp in color, but it adds a lot of interest. And then of course, here are two big 5x7 cards that we created. So 52 Christmas cards from one pad of 6x6 pattern paper and no scraps. If you found this video helpful, here's another video where you can find more ideas for enjoying your crafty time and supplies. Let me know you like this video with a share to your crafty community, subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss the next template or tutorial, and check the video description for product links. See you in the next video.